also focus heavily in the finance and the fintech industry. My understanding is the most important use cases in fintech for you from an AI perspective are around fraud detection and regulation of fraud, controlling fraud for various banks around the world. What are the core problems that you're solving from your perspective?
So our main focus in fintech is kind of optimize the flow of information in some sense, right? Now, fintech is a lot manual based controls because it pertains to money being a factor, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of controls in terms of manual intervention, manual reviews, manual understanding of documents and things like that.
Compliance.
Fraud example is one other thing, right?
Yeah.
So which we are trying to automate to some extent, or rather make it autonomous to a larger extent. Now, when we do that, so let's say onboarding, for instance, you go apply for a loan somewhere, you have to give 10 documents with your financial history, your KYC, your references from other banks and things like that. If you're a company, it's much more like you have to give your like balance sheets, your
GST
MOA,
details,
AUA, and things like that, right? So, and a lot of human effort goes into just looking at these documents and ensuring that it is clear, and they're not actually going through all the content. They're probably looking at few data points just to see if things are fine, right? So, which is completely doable with GPTs now. So that is something which we have done. Which we have completely automated the way you can extract information from any kind of document that is presented, cross-verify it, do validations on it, do fact checks on it using provided APIs behind the scene, connecting to government agencies, getting information from there. So that entire cycle we have done, right? Once you have made it automated, the biggest challenge now is fraud, right? If somebody comes in and try to game the system.
Right.
So that's, and most of the US banks, they have some sense of automated systems for credit approvals and risk management and things like that. They're the biggest challenge now that they're tackling is fraud, where people are coming and kind of editing the documents and uploading their, so those kind of aspect is what we are kind of detecting using generative AI. And as an example, I was giving deepfakes, right? People are uploading KYC videos generated by deepfakes. So all of those things are happening, which we're kind of handling through a fraud detection model.
Right. And you're right. I mean, the advent of and the easy access to these generative AI models has made it a lot simpler for people to create fraud in the first place, to create fraudulent documents and videos and images. And I've seen instances where people have created fraudulent receipts and fraudulent bank statements completely through AI, through models, right? So you need to one-up them in terms of detecting whether something is a true copy of its original or if it's been fraudulently created.
Right.
And that's, so what I'm hearing is those are some of the models that you've perfected for documents, for KYC, for all of these different use cases to detect fraud at scale.
Yes. So, and as I said, right, so fraud it's a recurring phenomena, right? So, and majority of fraud is people who are just trying something small. So it's not that complex always, right? People are probably just changing their name in some other document, or they're, let's say for insurance, they're submitting multiple claims just by changing a date. So they're basic frauds, which kind of covers a lot of volume. Right. And then there are these specialized frauds which keeps coming where people are trying latest technologies to fudge documents or create identity documents and then doing identity fraud and things like that. Right. So those are harder to solve. Now, the key here is to kind of being aware of all aspects of these frauds and then being ahead in terms of knowing these bad actors and then being one step ahead than them. Right. So that's where we try to kind of innovate and then keep a track of what's happening. And as we work with these banks and institutions, we get the real information from the market, what consumers are trying, and Some of them it's post facto, like once the fraud happens, you get that information and then you have to build around it and things like that.
Got it. So, in terms of your customers and the usage that you're enabling, you're helping a lot of these banks globally catch fraud in document submissions, loan applications, and so on. Are you also helping them leverage information from these documents in different ways?
Yes, yeah. So it's the entire suite, I would say. So basically, in fact, one of the bank we are working in Africa region, they are trying to build a branch assistant, basically. So instead of having a human as a teller at a branch, they're trying to replace with a system which can do everything when you
Interact
go to
with the customers?
Interact with the customers, collect their documents, help them, guide them. While in the process, you are ensuring that the information provided is correct and all of that. But so there are different aspects. It's one of the customer in Middle East. They enabled IPO subscription through WhatsApp.
Oh.
Right. So those kind of aspects are also there. So it's different ways of kind of reaching your customer, while we kind of empower the back end of it in terms of understanding customer, understanding their use cases, understanding the documents, extracting information from it, verifying it, validating it, and so on.
And also the industry expertise, the general know-how of the fintech space, the fact that you worked with banks for all this while. You have investments in companies that, for example, play in the space for a number of years. So that domain expertise is just as important as the AI expertise.
Definitely,
knowing the regulatory landscape, knowing what is permissible and what goes beyond. I mean, some of these frauds are just like, if you look at the whole Jane Street scandal that it's been in the news the last few days. I mean, that's also, it's a kind of fraud. It's a huge scale. It's not similar to what you described with the small, document fraud here and there at individual level. It's a massive scale.
Market manipulation.
Yeah, it's a market manipulation, right? But those things can also, assuming we have the right access levels, or assuming the AI systems are deployed by the right parties, stakeholders involved, things like that can be prevented, and they can be easily picked up by AI agents, right?
Definitely, yeah. So especially lot of banking fraud, especially, they happen or they are done by people who understand those systems, right? So that's the first. Very rarely it happens that somebody external comes in and kind of runs it. So similar for Jane Street, they are a major player in the market. They have been doing this, I think, they have presence across the world and whatnot. So when there's a human angle, obviously it's difficult to prevent it, because somebody obviously would know that this is happening, right? And they didn't do anything about it. Versus when you have agents or you have autonomous AI coming in and kind of monitoring such things, you have better compliance, because the control is not left to human interpretation. It's following the framework to the core.
The T.
Yeah. So that's the aspect which can prevent such instances. You're kind of taking the human angle away from such things. But at the same time, having access to information much quickly solves a lot of problem, right? So this was happening for last 1.5 years or 2 years.
Yeah.
This is now SEBI has got to figuring it out that something like this was happening.
Right.
Primarily because their speed of understanding the data, the speed of analyzing it is much slower, because they have to deal with so much at a time, and majorly humanly, right? Somebody has to sit and kind of understand all of it and come to it. And that's where AI plays a big role, because you can automate a lot of low risk functions, while the human functions are more towards looking at advanced problems and difficult situations. So that is something definitely that can be used for fast tracking compliance into these organizations.
Yeah, and it's actually, you mentioned Aadhaar and UPI. I actually agree. I think our banking systems are some of the best in the world. I mean, people take this for granted, but it's not easy to create banking systems for such a wide demographic and huge population, right? So you and I, we both experienced banking around the world. I think Indian banks are some of the best in the world in terms of how they're tackling customer problems.
In
right?
terms of regulation as well, yeah. So
Yeah.
in technology wise as well. So most of US is at certain pedigree, I would say, and then rest of the world actually looks up to India to guide like how banking should be done, what kind of technology should be used, what kind of regulation should be used. So that's actually pretty standard. A lot of African countries, Middle Eastern countries, they look up to India to kind of drive those things. So yes.
Yeah. And that's where we can be the trailblazers and the path setters for a lot of the world to follow. And some of the AI work that we're doing now, that you are doing with your company, can actually inform how the rest of the world catches up or the rest of the world sort of emulates.
Right. So it's again, it goes hand in hand. Like we obviously have to work with the bankers, we have to work with the regulators. So one of the use case we were working on was something similar to wallets in India, right? Like Paytms of the world. It requires a regulatory approval of central banks, right? So there were use cases where, like, we're working in an African country, they were not that comfortable with, so we had to go educate them how things are, how this will play out, what kind of controls are in place, what kind of risk controls are in place, and so on. And then we got that approval. So those kind of aspects are also there. It's not just a technology solution. You have to understand the landscape. You have to understand how banking as a practice is done as well. So that's an important aspect of building in this space.
And what is interesting to me is when we see the development of both India and China over the last 20 years or so, right? In many ways, they're leapfrogging at their Western counterparts. For things that are done more recently, you have a chance to do it a lot better, because for banking systems in America, they've been in place for hundreds of years now. And India also had its banking systems, but that when I remember centralized banking is something that came in our lifetimes to India, right? And we've been able to bring in and stack on technology at a much rapid rate. You look at the same story with electrification of cars in China. It's just leapfrogged the West and just overall technology adoption. If you look at the next frontier, which by many accounts is countries like India, countries in Africa, countries in South America, Brazil, and countries like Indonesia. I mean, that's the next frontier of where the development's sort of coming from, where these are the economies that are growing rapidly. There is a good chance that they might leapfrog the West in terms of systems like banking, systems like Fintech, right? So that's where the true frontier of innovation really is, rather than the Europes, the UKs, and the Americas of the world.
Yes, I think banking is a fantastic sector in terms of technology adoption. They've always adopted the latest and greatest very quickly, and India being one of them to lead a lot of factors, right? So yeah, definitely, I think some of the solutions that we're working on has a potential of kind of becoming widespread, used across the world, and solve some of these core problems.
Okay.